Hello, everybody. Once again, this is Bertha Lewis from the Black Institute, and here we are again in another all races, all faces, a real raw roundtable. Now, some of you who have been following us know that we've taken on different topics. A lot of times it is from the point of view of people of color, Black people and immigrants, and we deal with economic issues as well as, dealing with education, voting rights, and of course the environment. So welcome once again to All Races, All Faces. But tonight, we thought, since we are getting ready to get back into the winter season, and since there's one thing that has been just devastating all of us for almost 2 years, and that is COVID-19. And we know that New York City was the epicenter of COVID-19. We know that there's been many efforts in order to try to tackle this thing. But what has been in the news lately? And the news has been about vaccine mandates. So you know that first, people of color had a problem just getting access to vaccines. That's all we wanted, and we couldn't get it. Then there was a great push to have people vaccinated. And then the next thing we know, everybody's in love with essential workers, but those folks who had to be like correction officers or people who were delivering our food and everything were essential workers. And so a lot of these did not work for the state or for the city. And now that we've moved into the mandate stage, a lot of people are angry. They're angry, they're upset about this. And a lot of people have been getting tons of misinformation. So that's what we're here to talk about and why this issue has been brought up. And we have a great roundtable panel for you tonight. We have Council Member Mark Levine. And Council Member Mark Levine from Manhattan. And oh, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, you are looking at your new Manhattan Borough President. Mark represents the 7th District in Upper Manhattan, and he's been doing that since 2014. And now, until January 1st, he's been serving as the chair of the Council Committee on Health. And that's why we thought he would be a fabulous person to talk to. Hi, Mark. Welcome.
Thank you, Bertha. Thank you to the Black Institute. Really honored to be part of the conversation.
Okay. Our next panelist is Miss Elaine Blair Walker. Hi, Elaine.
Hi, how are you? Again.
So Elaine currently working in the health and hospital, and she's in the capacity now as a manager. And, she does a lot of stuff now remotely, as a lot of people do. But Elaine is no joke. She's, an associate in business, a bachelor's in forensic psychology. That's, don't mess with Elaine. She'll get all up in your head. And of course, she has a master's in labor studies. So she's involved in a lot of different things directly into the community. And at one point, she actually dealt with inmates on Rikers Island. So welcome, Elaine.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So our next person, now, as we always do here at the Black Institute, we always have a man of God. And tonight we have a full-blown bishop, Bishop Orlando Finlater. Hi, Pastor. How are you?
Good evening, Bertha. Good to be here with you.
Now, he is the senior pastor of the New Hope Christian Fellowship, but he's also a member of the SUNY Downstate Medical Center's Community Advisory Board, which is critically important in this time that we're in. He has just been in all areas, whether it is helping people with food pantries during the crisis, whether it has been ministering, and as you all know, during the onslaught of COVID here in New York City, there was many a time when people were in the ICU and they could not see their family, but they would call upon their pastor. And many folks, even if they weren't in his congregation, called upon Bishop Orlando Finlater. So thank you so much for being here. Now, our next person is Chasen Hollinson. Now, we are always talking about minority business owners and minority entrepreneurs, but this lady, ladies and gentlemen, he's the real deal. Now, Chasen, he actually joined this group called Upscale Crowd Marketing, which later became the Upscale Group. That should tell you what their mission is. And this is one of the groups that's the largest of Caribbean professionals in the tri-state area. And just so you know, a little commercial, Chasen Law owns 2 restaurants that I've been to, and I can't go there too often because I have to watch my weight. There's a restaurant called Suede and Caribbean Social. So he is our entrepreneur, and he will talk a little bit about how COVID and mandates have affected the entertainment and restaurant industry. Welcome, Chasen.
Thank you for having me, brother.
And we have our speaker, Dia Sarsour. Yes. So Dia was born and raised in Brooklyn. So, you know, when we say where Brooklyn at, look for Dia. Yeah. However, for the past 6 years, he's been a very important figure at the Maimonides Medical Center. And people that live in Brooklyn know Maimonides is one of the largest healthcare centers in the borough. And he has a title that might not tell you how important he is at Maimonides, but he is the patient experience coordinator. I've been a patient at Maimonides, so I know the patient experience there was really good, healed me because of people like Dia. Hi, Dia. Welcome.
Hi, Bertha. Thank you for having me.
And finally, we have another person from, God's Battalion, Reverend Sam Nicholas. Now, Reverend Nicholas is the pastor of the Evangelical Crusade of Fishers of Men. This is one of the largest Haitian populations in New York City, New York State, and one of the oldest. He's a Master of Divinity. He has an honorary doctorate in theology, and he came here as a little boy of 9 years old from another place that's been in the news, from Haiti. And he is the largest congregation of Haitian immigrants. And we will be joined by Pastor Sam Nicholas very shortly. Because now that we're in this age of technology, anything can happen. So let's get started, ladies and gentlemen. You know why we're here, to talk about the vaccine mandate, some of the misinformation, some of the anger that people are feeling out there. There's essential workers that have been subjected to this, state workers, city workers, federal workers, And so, even though we're trying to get out of this pandemic, this is in the news. So let me start with you, Mark, because I don't know how many people are in a councilmatic district, but talk a little bit about what you've been hearing about, mask and vaccine mandates, and what are people saying? What are people in Manhattan and in your district saying?
Thank you so much again, Bertha, for having us all together. There's just so much misinformation out there about this disease and about the ways we can fight it. And the best thing we can do is have conversations like this, which are open with people that address their concerns head on. And that's the kind of respectful dialogue that we need. And I'm so happy to be part of this. As you mentioned, I represent a city council district in Uptown Manhattan. I represent West Harlem, Southern Washington Heights, and a little bit of the West Side. And here, like every community in New York City, I think we have a range of reactions to this pandemic and to vaccination and masking and much more. I have to start by saying this is a community, like almost every community in New York City, that has been hit brutally hard by COVID over the past almost 2 years, as you said. And more than I think people realize, continues to be hit hard. New York City is now seeing a rise in cases again. I know we're exhausted by this pandemic, and we all hoped it wouldn't come to this, but we're now seeing over 1,000 cases a day just in the 5 boroughs of New York City. And this is a pandemic which has been defined from the very beginning by deep inequality, by racial inequality caused by decades and generation of racism in the medical system and in housing and in so much more that you, Bertha, have been incredibly outspoken, such an important voice on. And unfortunately, that has shaped reactions to vaccination. I will say that the overwhelming number of residents of this community have been vaccinated, as have the overwhelming number of residents of New York City. We're ahead of the nation on vaccination rates. I'm incredibly proud of that. It's part of why, well, we got hit very hard early on in 2020. In the summer wave, we didn't experience the level of horrible death that so much of the rest of the country did. And it's why I think heading into the winter wave, we are better protected than other parts of the country. But for those who are not vaccinated, the risk is still very, very real. And in fact, even for those of us who are, we want you to get your booster shots. I got my booster shot on Saturday. And maybe we'll talk about boosters in a little bit. I can be very honest in saying there are people who are pushing back against the mandate. And there's people who feel scared by vaccination. There's people who believe it would be harmful to their body. There's people who don't trust the medical system. They don't trust government. They don't trust elected officials. And frankly, they have a lot of reason not to trust.
Well, we're going to get to that because we want to examine some historical perspective to this. So let me ask you, Dia, what are people saying to you? What are you hearing out there about mandates?
So I think first and foremost, what I've been hearing about the mandates from my colleagues, at least at Maimonides Medical Center, and I think I'd like to say that I think I want to say upwards of 90% of the staff have been vaccinated, fully vaccinated, 2 shots. Maimonides was given a Pfizer vaccine out exclusively for maybe the past 10 months. For those who have had reservations about it, I feel like a lot of their reservations are held in the fact that now there is a mandate. It's being quote unquote forced upon them. But in discussions with them and in doing research with them to make them feel more comfortable, there isn't another option for a lot of them. As much as they are upset and as much as they are feeling like it's being forced upon them, they can't not work. And that's kind of where the conversation has gone for me and a lot of my colleagues. I mean, I was very happy to get vaccinated. I think I probably was maybe the first employee at the hospital to get vaccinated, mostly so I can protect myself. I live at home with 2 older parents. I wanted to kind of experience those early effects, at least on myself, which I don't feel like I had many side effects to either the first or second shot. But I think the being forced, I think the idea that it's being forced upon them has been the biggest cause of reservation. And it has in turn caused people to turn to misinformation to justify why they don't want to get the vaccine.
Well, Elaine, what are people saying? Are you hearing some of the same things about mandate?
Yes, pretty much is some of the same things, and I have a personal experience on that as well. During the wave of the COVID, my 2 daughters were working in the health field, and they brought home, and my entire household. So we were pretty much, as the media says, the hospitals were packed and everything, stay home. So based on my background from the Caribbean, we were taught how to use natural herbs. And for me, I'm not too much on medications and all that stuff. I mostly use the natural herbs. And that's what we use. My family used throughout the course of the COVID to use the natural herbs, and we were able to overcome it. Now, pretty much when I went to my doctor and asked my doctor what is in the vaccine, and he could not tell me. I am allergic to penicillin and other medications, so most definitely I'm going to be one of them who will be more on a hype of let me know because of my allergies. I need to know what is going on. I need to feel secure because I'm one of them kind of on that edge of let me know what's going on, right? But could not get a direct answer. And what made me scared was he told me a story regarding one patient that he had took the Pfizer, went to hospital, almost died, and he had to deny him of the second dose. But yes, so he told me that I could take the chances, okay, and all of that stuff. So pretty much, and I have a nurse cousin who also, she literally fled from, she was living in Virginia. She worked along with COVID patient, and she also worked along with people who took the vaccine, were healthy, and after they take the vaccine, they came in and some were crippled, some died. So she personally had that experience. And when her job, she worked there for over 15 years. And when her job said they were mandating, she literally fled from Virginia, starting like, the on-call nurses. And then she went to Florida to live because of what she was experiencing.
Well, it seems as though that's why we wanted to talk about that,
Right, right.
because there's a lot of difference from state to state. But Chasen, I mean, you are a restaurant owner, hospitality.
Right.
So much stuff was shut down. And then, of course, when we began to open back up, your folks, at Suede and Caribbean Social,
Hmm.
wound up having to deal with that. So talk to us a little about what people were talking to you about in terms of the mandate.
Right. So I think most employees were looking towards getting the vaccine, just not yet. They were probably waiting to see the reaction of others. However, consultations like this, Bertha, it's so critical to the livelihood and sustenance of small businesses. A lot of the decisions are made on the levels where our voices are not heard. So there was no consultation. No one spoke with any of my peers. I've communicated with many business owners. In fact, another prominent restaurant offered to give up his business because he couldn't sustain it for at no cost, just so that he could cover his expenses. So I'm not anti-vaccine. I'm for it, but it's not what, but how it was done, how it was implemented. And just last week, the Restaurant Association came out and said that the vaccine mandate is worse to restaurants than the shutdown itself. Now,
Yeah.
the vaccine itself is worse to restaurants, meaning all restaurants, much less restaurants owned by people of color. The truth of the factor is, we, in our community, we had way lesser numbers of vaccinated people. So when the shutdown started, when the vaccine went into effect, our restaurants stayed almost empty for the days immediately following the effect. And Bertha, you've been around and you see how the numbers dwindled, people visiting, and we had to, we had to comply. But I think in a situation like this, we still have to maintain payroll, pay our taxes, everything. We so
Yes, council member, those damn taxes.
so I'm not anti-vaccine, but the way it was implemented, it really restrained us, and we had to lay off almost 25% of our staff. Now we also, well, Bertha, we have 3 restaurants. We also have Caribbean Kitchen, which is a takeout. So between the 3 restaurants, we have almost 100 employees, and we had to lay off 25% of our staff.
Well, please
Unfortunately for
forgive
that
me
staff,
for not
Bertha,
mentioning
permit me to
Caribbean
make one more point. The vaccine mandate took full effect September 13th. That's just when the unemployment additional benefit of the $300 ended. Double whammy for both employees and businesses. So it's not what was done, but how it was done, how it was implemented. And I hope conversations like this will encourage our leadership to include the voices of us on the ground, to include our voices in the ongoing dialogue.
Well, finally, let's hear from our spiritual advisor, because as I said, when we were in the depths of this thing, the only people that might have been able to get into a hospital were pastors. The only people that seemed to be feeding folks when they couldn't get into a restaurant was our pastors. So Bishop Findlater, what were you hearing? What are you hearing about the mandate?
Well, again, Bertha, thank you. I mean, the Black Institute is always at the forefront of these issues, and we appreciate the work that you do. So, as you know, they still have not designated us as essential workers, faith leaders, or houses of worship. And while we were closed to worship, we were open for everything else. So I think the experts were figuring it out as we were going along, right? So one day you'll hear this, the next day you'll hear something else. And I think that confused people. I am pro-vaccine. I got vaccinated because I also had COVID, and it's a horrible disease. So I'm pro-vaccine. I agree with those who have said it is the way it was implemented. We fear the government. We don't trust the government. This whole issue of a vaccine being available in a few months, people are asking, how is that possible? And Berta, when there are doctors and healthcare workers who refuse to take it, the average person on the street is saying, if my doctor is not taking it, then why should I take it?
Yep.
Well, that brings us, like to a lot of stuff that was one of. So I'm going to throw this open. Very simply, should there be a mandate?
No.
A mandate for the vaccine? Yes or no? And I'm just throw it out there. You guys go for it.
I believe that it should not be a mandate. Why? Because number one, we know already the history, especially with the Black community in terms of vaccines and the trials and stuff like that. Number two, what others were talking to me about, because I'm also from the faith-based background. I'm an elder in my church. And in the midst of the pandemic, we have a mix. The government put it in such a way where those who were vaccinated says, well, if we go back to church, the vaccinated have to sit on one side and the unvaccinated have to sit on the other side. So here we go now, when in most cases I had to chime in and says, no, we have to protect each other, and we cannot. So there is a conflict within the church itself. It causes that a split within the church. Then you have another set say, okay, which doctor is going to pay their patient to take medication, to buy the medication? Why are they paying us to take the vaccine? That is another issue. There is concern. And you have the healthcare workers that are actually experiencing and seeing what's happening to their patient, is saying, I am not taking it because I myself is also afraid. And then you have me as working for health and hospital, no longer work with the patients anymore. And I was mandated. I also sent in a letter for religious exemption and was denied, and could not tell the reason. What was in it that you deny me? That was not sufficient evidence to stop me from work for 1 week, take away half of my pay until I get vaccinated. So
So what do you think? I mean, you know, she's very clear. So Elaine, you're like, wait a minute, this mandate, yes or no? No. So chime in,
If I'm going to
folks.
give my opinion on this,
Yeah,
I don't
we
think there
like
should be a mandate.
opinionated people.
I don't think there should be a mandate, because I think people should be going out there to get vaccinated. We've discussed things like misinformation and confusion. I mean, if I can touch on one thing, Miss Elaine, if your doctor could not tell you what was in the vaccine, you should probably find yourself a new doctor. That is not an acceptable.
Which I am.
It's and not to, again, for me, not to sway people to get vaccinated, but for a healthcare professional to tell you he doesn't know what's in the vaccine, that's pretty unacceptable in my eyes. I feel like I'd be getting a call from an upset patient in my position telling me that their doctor said that they didn't know what was in the vaccine, because that isn't really that really isn't okay. And just in terms of religious exemptions, just because you said that you were denied and not given a reason why, I looked into that too, like with a couple of my colleagues. And for example, this isn't the first time healthcare workers have been mandated to get a vaccine. When the rubella vaccine came out, healthcare workers were mandated, and there were no requests for religious exemptions when rubella came out. So part of the reason is because there's no acceptable or reasonable accommodation in their eyes. I can't say I agree with that 100%, but they're saying if you don't get the vaccine, there isn't another accommodation that they can make for you that makes it safe for you to be around your colleagues, for example. So, there has been, and I think Bishop Findlater said it the best, they're going about this as it comes at them. While we were very confused about the vaccine, so were a lot of the physicians very early on, which did lead to a lot of people having more negative outcomes early on. I can speak just on working at Maimonides Medical Center. A few weeks into treating patients who had come in with COVID-19, I started noticing that patients were being intubated and laid on their stomachs. I had never seen that practice before. I brought it up with a few of the attending doctors, and they said that this is a new practice that they are trying, that they saw being implemented in countries that were kind of ahead of us in the death tolls. These countries had so many people die, for example, in Italy, that they started trying to think, what can we do different? Let's lay a patient on their stomach. And they found that that worked. So the confusion was caused by misinformation, but there was also just natural confusion because this was something that not a lot of people had dealt with at the time. I mean, so back to the original question, I don't think there should be a mandate, but I just think there shouldn't be a mandate because people should be going out there to get vaccinated in mass. Again, to protect those who actually cannot get the
Let me
vaccine.
to chime in. I understand the concern of the slippery slope concept. If governments
Mhm.
start mandating, where do they stop? So I understand that. However, it's all about the greater good. So you may not mandate what someone could do with their own body, consume
Mhm.
alcohol till they die. You cannot probably mandate that. But if you're going to be in a public space where you can affect somebody else, I do understand and appreciate government stepping in to protect the other members of society. So if you want to stay at your house and don't go into the public space at all, I do appreciate that. You don't want to get vaccinated, it's your prerogative. However, if you do decide to go on the bus, go on the train, go into a public sphere, I do understand it's government role to protect society. And I appreciate that role. I mean, I'm especially against they chose the restaurant industry to be the first for the mandate. However, I do understand again, the approach was wrong, totally inappropriate. The approach was
Yes.
wrong. So that's my position on this.
So if I could chime in first on the religious exemption, I think where people go wrong, if you have ever taken a flu shot, you cannot now claim religious exemption. So that's where people go wrong. They've taken a shot 5 years ago, 7 years ago. And if your religious institution is not anti-vaccine, and almost none are, almost as if you deal with the Christian faith, almost no Christian religion is anti-vaccine. So it's difficult for a member of my church to claim religious exemption when the church doesn't claim that exemption. I am 100% in favor of mandate. Again, you have a right to do what you want to do, but I also have a right to protect myself. I was
Correct.
just at the bar, just went to a Nets game, 15,000 people. I don't want people sitting next to me who are not vaccinated because I have a right to be safe in my own environment. Again, as most of the panelists have saying, there should have been much more education. They should have used much trusted people in the community to send the message out. So I think the government failed in that respect. But I'm 100% in favor of mandates.
But Bishop, before they even got to the point of disseminating the information, I think first and foremost, members of society like this from here should have been part of that decision-making process to decide how
Exactly.
to best to implement it.
Yes.
So
If
Because
I could,
I was on the state vaccine committee, but they'll call a meeting and tell you what they've decided to do. Right? So
that's right.
at one point, I stopped going to the meeting, wasting my time because you invite me to be on the committee, and then you have this meeting, and then you say we're doing A, B, C. Then you don't need my opinion.
Yeah, and for me, I am not against vaccine because growing up in the Caribbean, we all have to take all those vaccine. I have 4 children and they all are fully vaccinated. But just think about when vaccine are being made, it takes a process, and within not even a year, you hear that the vaccine was ready to be given. Not only that, it was forced upon and not much education, like you guys says, that we should have people who are actively involved in the community, get those people, train them, and so that we can go out in the community and talk to our folks who were we already involved in. For example, I coach the foot soccer team from 3 to 13. I have to deal with the parents, right? For me, I am a figurehead right there where I could parents come to me and says, I work in the school system. I don't want to take it because they're pushing me and I don't feel safe, and my children, and I don't want to go here. Yet wherever they go, they wear the mask and they want to be safe. But me now, I would be the point person to say, listen, I was being educated on it. This is what it is. It's being safe. It's okay to take it. But when you have your doctor who can't tell you and make you feel comfortable in doing that, you have the media that is pushing it, you have the government that is saying, okay, it's safe, and yet so you have 1 minute it come out and say, when you take it, you may not get the vaccine. Then another one come out, the same person come out and say, if you take it, you will get the disease again. So therefore, I am caught up between the rock and the hard place.
Right.
I cannot educate my people, and I myself cannot tell them, okay, it is okay, because I have doubts myself.
Can I
Well,
just
Mark, you were starting to talk about, you know, how this has become so politicized.
Yeah.
And, you know, some of the panelists have talked about and alluded to, you know, people of color and their history. You know, we've just seen doctor says one thing, media says another thing. You know, so you know, the politics of this to me is so toxic, and the backlash. So, you know, whether you like a mandate or you don't, you know, what about the politics of this thing, the backlash that's coming, and, you know, the historical context of this?
Yes, the politicization, the polarization around vaccination it's really horrifying, and it is dangerous. We've been vaccinating in this country for generations. Our children don't grow up today with the real fear of polio like our parents and grandparents did because of childhood vaccination. Kids today might not even know what smallpox is because it's been eradicated from humanity.
They don't.
And diseases like measles and mumps and rubella are not entirely eradicated, but they're rare now because of vaccination. And there's always been anti-vaxxers, but it's been a very, very small segment of society.
But look, it's booming.
It has. And look, again, I acknowledge all the horrible history that would lead people to distrust the medical system and government. And look, as Elaine mentioned, there are some doctors, I would call them rogue doctors, who are out there spewing extremely anti-science, reckless perspectives. And there's a move to take their medical licenses away by the broader medical community. The broader medical community is absolutely behind this vaccine. This is the most scrutinized vaccine probably in human history. We're up to over 9 billion doses worldwide. It is remarkably safe and effective beyond our wildest expectations. That's really beyond debate at this point. Now, has our society done enough to be on the ground explaining this to people? No. We need to elevate trusted leaders, people like Bishop Findlater, who speak so eloquently about this. And the city should do what it did when we promoted census participation last year. We should have hundreds of community-based groups funded on the ground with staff going everywhere to promote the safety and effectiveness of this vaccine. But you know, if I can just weigh in on whether we need vaccine mandates, I want to remind people that this is a life and death crisis. New York City has lost 34,700 of our neighbors, friends, family members. All of us have lost loved ones. All of us. I have. I'm sure that every single person in this roundtable has. And every one of those deaths is tragic. But the fact that we are still losing in New York City 200 or 300 people every month to a disease where there is already a readily available vaccine that is safe and effective is really just heartbreaking. Every single death now in an era of vaccines being readily available is really hard to take. And I don't want to see one more person die. And so in some sensitive settings like healthcare and schools, we have to protect the vulnerable. The kids who are there who are too young to be vaccinated. People who are immunocompromised, who the vaccine doesn't really protect well. There are people that we have to protect. And, you know, if you get a broken leg and you don't want to treat it, that's your decision. If you get cancer and you don't want to treat it, that's your decision. Those things aren't contagious. But COVID-19 is contagious. And so if you choose not to get vaccinated and then therefore could get the virus, you're exposing loved ones, family members, people in your school, in your congregation, in your neighborhood, people who maybe couldn't get vaccinated because they're too young and they're not eligible yet, or maybe they have an immunocompromised condition and vaccines aren't effective for them. They didn't choose those things, and you're exposing them. And so this is different. That's why vaccination is the one thing that we mandate. We do it for measles and mumps and many other diseases. It's never been controversial. It shouldn't be now. And it's why I do support mandates in this time of emergency.
Well, I mean, I can't, for those, I know we're live streaming, but for those who can't see him, Pastor Nicholas, can you hear us?
I can hear you, yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. There's a bit of an echo, but, we can hear you. We know that you are a Black pastor, but I didn't know that you preferred a black screen. But nevertheless, that's okay. But Pastor, let me just ask you, because you came in a little late. I know that your congregation is, largely Haitian and Haitian speaking, the Evangelical Crusade. And we've been talking about to mandate or not to mandate. And why people get misinformation or fear or wrong information, and how it was done. My grandmother and the old folks around me used to always say, it's not what you do, is how you do it. And what we've known is that there wasn't real engagement with houses of worship. There would be a pop-up here today on Monday, gone on Wednesday, and there was situations in which people thought, if I, when I go to church, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, vax, are going to be on one side, unvaxxed on the other. It's like all you sinners and heathens sit over there, and everybody that's saved, you come on down front. But one of the things that I am really interested in, and here's the thing that gets me, there was a situation in which, whether you like mandates or you didn't, we're the United States of America, right? Big, powerful. And, some people say, well, listen, we've been working on COVID for 10 years, but we just got, the technology is not new. They just put it into effect. Some people were suspicious of it because it was Operation Warp Speed. That sounds like Star Trek or, Star Wars or something like that. So we can understand that. But here's what's gotten to me, Pastor. And tell us a little bit about what the members of your congregations have been saying. But I have been very disturbed because when we first started this is a pandemic. It is global. So what happens in one country affects us here, even this Delta variant. So there has been very little talk now of actually looking at countries like Haiti that are right near us in our atmosphere. And we seem, as the United States, to be like, okay, we're going to give you some welfare vaccine, but you on your own. So tell us what your congregants are saying and whether they are for the vaccine or not, and talk a little bit about, vaccines in other countries.
So, first of all, I want to apologize, one, about the echo. Two, I'm not going to apologize about my black face, but I'm going to apologize about the black screen. Okay, so I was born this way. I was born with the black face. I try to wash it off. Everything I try to do, it just nothing happens. So it's
Well, this is the Black Institute, so
this is the
it's
black
all right.
Institute. So the technology, I tried everything that I could. I thought that I was technologically savvy enough to be able to navigate it, but unfortunately, we had some renovations in our church, and I moved my computer, and I did not realize I didn't have a Google Chrome inside of the new system, and I didn't want to stay on my phone. So my apologies for that, and I'm not sure why this computer is not showing. It's just only showing a black screen. But however, you asked me a very, very long question, and I know everyone has been speaking for a long time. So I know we have a hard stop. So as a pastor that has been saved to close out this segment, so it's going to take me a little bit of a second to answer my question, to answer your question one. So COVID-19 for us, it started in our church back in November and December of 2019. We started educating our congregation back in November and December of 2019. By January of 2020, we had inside of our congregation hand sanitizer machines. We believed in the science. Our health team, they pulled me to the side. They said, Pastor, back in December, there is a pandemic coming. It's coming. It's not here on this side yet, but we need to get the congregation up to speed and aware of it. So we would I gave the health team time on Sunday mornings to explain what was coming. And we even started telling people that we would have to do fist bumps. And those of you that are not comfortable with fist bumps, you're gonna have to do feet bumps. So we did feet bumps and not even elbow bumps. So we even told them that even throughout the Eucharist, you were able to, and as passing out the Eucharist, because we broke the bread and and it was airborne, so we understood. So one of the things that helped us in our congregation is that we believed in the science, we believed in our people that were able to pull us to the side and say, this is coming. So we knew it was coming. So we made sure that our folks, that they were well instructed in what was coming. So when COVID came, I remember exactly the dates. March 8th through 15th, when New York City shut down. I was out. It was on the West Coast. It was on the West Coast, all the way in California, March 8th to the 15th. I was supposed to come back to New York City on the 15th. I remember the dates very vividly. On the 15th of March, that Sunday morning, I was on a cruise ship. The captain said, your ship is going to be diverted, not to Puerto Rico. Your ship is going to spend 2 more days on the sea, and you're going to be ending up in Orlando. So for 2 days now, so I didn't come back to the city on the 17th. By the 19th, when New York City closed, we decided that in my church, in my congregation, that we were not going to close the doors. The mandate was to have 10 people. We said we're going to use 3 members of the praise team, 3 members of the band, 3 members of our multimedia ministry, and I would stand in the gap and preach until church was open again. So when church opened up again, we made sure that people wear masks. People would come in, and some people refused to wear masks. We said, no, you're going to come in here. You're not going to come in here without a mask. We said categorically, no, you have to wear a mask. People would come in, they would try to be rebels. We said, no, you have to wear a mask because one, you're going to protect yourself, and 2, you're going to protect us. And on the other side, what we did, we started teaching the congregation that it was not Matthew 24 happening. It was not Matthew 25 happening. It was not the book of Revelation happening. What we taught them, that if it was the book of Revelation, that the rapture already happened, then we had been left behind and we were in trouble. Because what we believe is that the rapture is going to come, but the rapture did not come yet. And so that we're still living in the days of Revelation chapter 1 to chapter 2. So if the rapture came, then we are in big trouble because we were left behind. So when we started telling them that, and then when the time came, we put a mandate with our praise team. We put a mandate with our members that those members that wanted to come to church that had not been vaccinated, you could come to church, but you could no longer serve as an usher. You could no longer serve as a deacon. You could no longer serve on the praise team. You could no longer serve as a musician, because in order for you cannot be up front and serving the people if you were not vaccinated. There were some people, they started going. It was like, oh, hallelujah, like the Lord told me not to. I said, well, if the Lord told you not to, I'm not sure what gospel that you are reading, because the Lord told me to take the vaccine. He told the bishop to take the vaccine. So we're not reading the same Bible. So if you're going to be here inside of my fellowship, you have to follow the mandate. So that's one of the things that we did. But in our country, in Haiti, we did not have an outbreak. So I noticed, in the West Indies and Africa and the countries, that were the questions that you asked us. We did not have an outbreak as much as other countries here in the United States, although they were wearing masks, but COVID did not attack the population as it did in Brooklyn, as it did in the United States. So fortunately for us in my congregation, we did not have many deaths from COVID-19. Other congregations from the Haitian community, I know a church that was decimated. The church, they had a lot of elderly members. It was decimated. The church, maybe 15-20% of the congregation, they went up to be with the Lord. But fortunately for us, we believed in the science. We were proactive. We installed hand sanitizer machines way before that they were mandated. We had them installed before I went on vacation in March. We had all these things installed. We believed in the science. We believed in the technology, and we're still preaching in the technology. So for us Haitian Creole folks, one of the things that the people that are here, who are not used to me, they've never heard. One of the things that we preach to our church, for the people that are monolingual, that speak only English, in heaven we speak Creole. Here on earth we speak French, Spanish, Portuguese, all sorts of languages. But in my church, I teach my congregation that the universal language that we will speak when we get to heaven is Creole. Why? Because in Louisiana, they speak Creole. North Carolina, they speak Creole. Jamaica, they speak Creole. Trinidad, they speak Creole. And portions all over the world, they speak Creole. So Creole is the universal language. So when we get to heaven, if you start learning a couple words of Creole, so when you get to heaven, you will learn how to speak the universal language. So this is the reason that I have a black screen. So you cannot see my face, you cannot see my smile, you cannot see that the preacher that waited that had the 10 minutes to close out this portion. I had this portion, so it was divinely appointed that you would not be able to see me, that you will hear my voice. It's not apocalyptical. It is not the book of Revelation. It is not because COVID is going to come through your computer. It is the technology. The technology made it this way. And so thank you for being part of, for letting me be part of this gathering today. My political godmother, thank you so much for always including me in everything that you do. My fellow Bishop Finlay that's here, thank you so much, everyone. I hope I answered all the questions that I was posed and with the time that I was allowed. God bless you all.
Wow. Well, listen.
Yes, ma'am.
Here's what we all want to know, Pastor. You've explained to us.
Yes.
Y'all wasn't having it.
No.
In the evangelical crusade, Fishers of Men.
Yes.
You did a mandate before the government said do a mandate. If you want to come up in here, you got to wear a mask and you need to get vaccinated. So here's what we all want to know. We've all gotten a little taste of what it would happen if we came to your church, okay? And I tried to learn a Creole phrase years ago, pep bouni, panjan perdi, something like that. I know that's not right, but that's okay. Because I know, Pastor, you're going to say you need to come to church more and you would speak more Creole.
What pastors will tell you that?
So, but here's what we want to know. I think I would feel very safe coming, into your church. But Pastor, are we going to have Thanksgiving dinner at your church again this year?
Well, unfortunately, we will come back with Thanksgiving dinner. So the context of the Thanksgiving dinner, Bertha Lewis, myself, and Sanford Rubinstein, 4 years ago, we started to do a Thanksgiving dinner from 12 to 2. 12 to 2, we did a regular Thanksgiving dinner. We went and bused folks from the shelters. We brought them into our church, our fellowship hall. Bertha Lewis, she puts on her apron. Sanford Rubinstein puts on his apron, and we stand there and we serve folks from 12 to 2. Unfortunately, this year we're still in the midst of COVID. We could have done the dinner, but we're renovating the fellowship hall. And as soon as we're finishing renovating the fellowship hall, hopefully next year we'll be back with the Thanksgiving dinner. But this year, this Friday at 4 p.m., we'll be giving out turkeys along with some other food. So you are free, Bertha, and those of you that can stand, come and stand in line with us to hand out turkey and other meal items. We have other meal items. We have a nice package for everyone that we'll be giving out. First come, first serve. Friday at 4 p.m. We are at 557 East 31st Street between Forster and Farragut. So this is something that Bertha Lewis and Sanford Rubinstein and we started, I think, about 5 years ago. We could not do it last year because of COVID-19. But next year, when we're back, we would invite everyone to come back and stand in line with us. You'll put on an apron and put on chef hats, and we're serving the community. One of the things that is different about the way we do it, we're not serving the people with paper plates and paper napkins. We have tableware for them. We put tablecloth on there for them. We have fresh flowers on the table, donated by Marine Flowers. We have a live band that's there playing music for them. So we do a banquet for the folks because we truly believe at the Black Institute, at ECCC, if people are not asking you to give them something, you should give them the best. And this is what we're doing. And so they didn't ask us for Thanksgiving dinner. So if you're inviting us to come, the community to come to Thanksgiving dinner, you need to pull out your fine linen. You need to pull out your software, your what you call that, the forks and the knives, and so they can eat properly. And this is what we do.
And it is a very grand.
We're waiting for everyone to come out.
You wouldn't know that.
To come out.
You wouldn't know that they were feeding, the homeless. It really is a very dignified thing. But we are getting ready to close at the segment, and I want to go back one more around to everybody. Here's what's troubling. What's troubling to me is there has been this huge backlash. It is hyper political. Sometimes, I think, Jason, as some restaurants, when people are asked for their vaccination, folks in the hospitality industry have been, attacked.
Yeah.
We also know that in the healthcare sector, in some hospitals, some medical centers, people have, gotten very belligerent. There's been huge marches, and, with all kinds of people. So we do want to leave folks with some idea of, how they feel and what to do. So is it the backlash just the mandate? Is the backlash just political? Is the backlash big? Or is it just a small segment of people And what have been the effects of the backlash? And what do we think? You know, we as a collective, if there was one thing you could say to folks, how do we deal with this? You know, because we're not quite out of COVID yet. So Elaine, you know,
Yeah,
what
I
would you
believe
leave people with in terms of discussing the backlash, what the effects are, and what we can do about it?
I believe even in the health aspect of it, where the nurses who and doctors who were hailed as heroes, right? Most of them or some of them are now out there protesting that they don't want to take it. I think the first thing that should be done is make sure that they have the proper preparation mentally. Seek counseling. Make sure you provide counseling for those individuals who have experienced lots and lots of deaths. Remember that alone affect them mentally, spiritually, physically, and emotionally. Most of them were not prepared to deal with the COVID people who are dying naturally and deal with some who they see experience that after they take the vaccine. So now what my thing is, and I have been saying, what about how soon we forget we were hailing these nurses and doctors as heroes, but yet still now some of them are being put on leave. You're taking away their livelihood, you're firing most of them. What about making sure you set up programs where they can be counseled and get to that place where they feel comfortable in taking the vaccines? Now you have some saying the Pfizer is good, the Moderna is not good, the Pfizer is not good, and also the other one, which is the Johnson and Johnson, is not good either. So people are being confused as what to take. Now, for me, when I decided to take the vaccine, I took the Johnson and Johnson because I said that's one shot right there. I don't have to go a second and third time, right? Even though others were telling me that, okay, the Pfizer is good. If you had told me, I would have let you know that you should take the Pfizer because it's much more safer. And I said, but all of them comes with side effect, no matter which one you take it. So I am gonna, being as I'm a scaredy cat when it come on to needles, that's number one. And no one could give me a comforting aspect as what to take. I am gonna go the one way route.
Well,
So
here's what you need to do.
right,
You need to go to Maimonides Medical Center and meet up with Dia Sarsour, and he will take care of you, and you won't even know about a needle or anything,
I did
and
mine.
they
I'm
will tell
Keep
you
your
vaccinated
eyes on
already.
everything
me.
and answer all your
Yeah,
questions.
yeah.
But Dia, what about this backlash? You know, as we're leaving folks, how do you view this backlash, and what can we do about it? And what are the effects of this backlash?
So real quickly before I talk about the backlash, I just want to say I really love what Elaine said about especially medical centers creating programs where staff, not just vaccinated or unvaccinated, not even people who are just afraid of taking the vaccine, all staff who worked through the pandemic, some sort of mental counseling. At Maimonides Medical Center during the COVID-19 pandemic, it ignited a movement. We now have a Team Lavender 24/7, 365 hotline for employees to call in the heat of the moment. We call it PFA, psychological first aid. You just had a death on the floor that was maybe a little tougher than maybe other deaths on the floor, maybe not an elderly woman, who may have succumbed to, just age and natural causes, but 30-year-olds coming in during the COVID-19 pandemic and succumbing to these, this disease that we didn't think was going to take these 30-year-old people. And I think that also brings me back to the politicizing the vaccine. And I don't think we can talk about the politicizing of the vaccine unless we talk about the politicizing of COVID-19, the actual disease, because Pastor Sam brought up a really important thing. This vaccine, this COVID-19 disease, it didn't start in 2020. It started late in 2019. We were dealing with it as well. And if we're going to talk about the political aspect, we can't forget who was in office at the time, and the back and forth about our president at the time, whose name will go unsaid now, and the healthcare leaders who he assigned to deal with this. We're talking about he's fighting with Fauci on CNN about what Fauci said, and Fauci's trying to not step on the president's toes and what he says, but kind of reiterating, no, follow the professional here, follow the healthcare professionals here. So, that also goes back to Bertha, you asked earlier, why has the anti-vax community been booming lately? And I think part of that is because they're not even anti-vax. They're anti-mandate, and they're anti-government. They're anti-government, and they're anti just like any person in a leadership role telling them what to do with their bodies. But I think, again, then that all goes back to what Bishop Findlater said. This isn't like telling a woman whether or not she can or cannot have an abortion. This isn't something that's singular to just you and your own body and your own health. Your refusal to get a vaccine, and I like to use the healthcare industry in particular because I work there, but also, like Elaine said, there are a lot of healthcare professionals who are not trying to get the vaccine, and I would think that most of their fears, and I won't even call it fears, most of their reservations are just rooted in the fact that someone is telling them now to go and get it. Not that they're afraid of the side effects of the vaccine, not that they're afraid of what's going to happen 5 years down the line. It's because the president said it, the senator said it, the governor said it, and now their supervisor at the job is saying it. And I think that's what's causing, obviously the process, we all agree, the process in which the mandation was rolled out was, maybe not the best, but but what we have to also understand is, as confused as we were about this, they were confused about this as well.
Yes.
Like we were talking about, I still don't get the wearing your mask at the restaurant when you leave your table and going to the bathroom. If everyone sitting at their table doesn't have their mask on. But as much as I would love to question that over and over and over again, I understand that these people were trying their best to create these rules to help keep people safe. And sometimes it just didn't pan out correct. It didn't pan out in the way they had hoped. But I do have a little bit of sympathy for those people. It was a crazy time during the pandemic. Like Bertha said, my job during the pandemic became, I had to stand at the front door and turn family members away from coming to visit their dying family members. That was a far call from what I did before the pandemic. My job was to make people happy. My job was to make sure people who came to the hospital and their family members had everything that they needed. But there was no, like I said, there was no reasonable accommodation to be made. I couldn't say, okay.
Well, there really wasn't a roadmap. There wasn't a roadmap for this. And
exactly.
I think a lot of people were making it up. But, since we're going to have a brand new Manhattan Borough president and everybody going to be looking at you, you represent the government tonight, what will you do if you have backlash? And what will you take, how will you deal a little bit differently as the Manhattan Borough president? People have said is how this is done, how the information is given out, how we deal with houses of worship that are right there in our communities, and essential workers, and how, as the new Manhattan Borough president, people talk about the holidays coming up and how there may be a spike, right? So when you get in, how do you deal with the backlash? And how do you try to do things differently in the borough of Manhattan, and not make some of the same mistakes that were made before?
Well, I want to thank Dia for pointing out that no one deserves more responsibility for the politicization of this pandemic than the former president, whose name we will not mention. There are countries around the world that also have strong right-wing movements where that didn't happen. And vaccination rates are much higher there. America is almost unique in the world in the way that the base of an entire political party has rejected this life-saving treatment. And imagine how different history would have been if the guy we don't name had just stuck with the science and told people to listen to their doctors. Imagine all the death and destruction that could have been avoided. But I'm really worried now that the backlash that has started, specifically around COVID-19 vaccination and mandates, will spread to a backlash against requiring kids to get their measles vaccine when they show up at school, or their polio vaccine, or will lead people to question basic medical advice about what constitutes a healthy diet, about why we shouldn't take up smoking. Once you start to question the advice of doctors, I worry where that will lead. And I do think it's incumbent upon all of us who are leaders now, who are in government positions, to first, not to demonize people who are disagreeing with our advice. I feel very, very strongly, you've heard me say, feel very, very strongly that the vaccines are safe and effective and that everyone should get it. But I'm not going to call people names who disagree with me. I'm not going to denigrate them, because that is extremely counterproductive, and it only leads to further polarization. And that's happening all too often. I think that we have to respect people. We have to meet people where they are. We have to invest in community-based messaging and local leaders, trusted messengers, like so many of you on this call, to be out there in the community. Government has to do that. I do want to just, since this will probably be the last time I can speak here, I want to remind people of the moment that we're in. This is not a past tense discussion. This is not a rear view discussion, because this pandemic is still leading to over 1,000 cases a day, just in the 5 boroughs of New York City, a number which is rising, and we haven't yet gotten to the holidays, when people are going to be traveling and gathering. And last year, the holidays really drove a spike, and the cold weather, which is sending us back inside for socializing. So we have every reason to worry that we have a tough couple of months ahead of us. Now, if you've been vaccinated, then you are well protected, but your risk is not zero. And we haven't had time to talk about boosters, but particularly if you're over 65, if you have an underlying medical condition, if you work in a high-risk setting, get your booster. The city has now said anybody 18 and over can get a Pfizer or Moderna booster if they are more than 6 months out from their first shot. Anyone who's 2 months out from Johnson & Johnson can get their booster. I got J&J earlier. Elaine, I'm not sure if you said that was less safe. It's actually entirely safe. I'm glad I got it, one and done. But I did get a booster. I decided to get Pfizer as a booster. Mixing and matching is actually probably beneficial, certainly allowed. So I'm going to close by saying to everybody that we've gotten this far by rallying as a city, by beating the national average on vaccination, by wearing our masks way more than the rest of the country, including uptown. I'm really proud of New York City for what we've done to beat this back. We've survived a lot. We've come together, and I want us to continue to do this during the months ahead. And I'm really grateful for this forum to get open and honest conversation out there, respectful, I wish we had more forums like this. So I really want to thank you, Bertha, for your leadership on more issues than I could mention, and thank the Black Institute for hosting this today and for having me as part of the discussion. Thank you so much.
Well, we've heard from the politician, but Jason, number one, I don't know what you doing for Thanksgiving, and whether or not a sister could get a free meal. Just saying. However, Jason, like you are now on the front lines with your 3 restaurants. So how do you deal with the backlash? How do you think, what effects are you seeing from this backlash? And what would you advise people to do as we close out?
Well, I think we are very sympathetic to the backlash, even though I'm pro-vaccine. We're still very sympathetic because we understand where it's coming from. People do not want to be controlled by government, and especially a government they don't trust. We get it. However, for us, we comply with the law. Initially, it was very hard, but we continue to comply, and we explain to the people why we have to do what we do. So we put all of the blame on the government, even though I'm pro-vaccine, but we put all the blame. But people are becoming more understanding. People are becoming more understanding when we explain to them that it's not about them, it's about protecting our other customers as well. So even though we allow them to go in, it's not fair to the other customers. So people are becoming more understanding. And I think in the future, and hopefully, I'm not sure if the councilman is still on, hopefully forums like this takes place before mandates takes place, before stuff
Yes.
are implemented. We need these kind of forums so the voices on the ground can be heard. So I really appreciate you for having this, Bertha. And I learned a lot from listening to my other panelists. So thank you all.
Well, Bishop, as usual, you got the last and final word, except for me, of course, because I always get the last word. But again, I just want to round out this discussion, which has been fascinating. Because I think what we've gotten here is a microcosm of just with everybody's expressed what is really out there. But we are still currently in this pandemic. COVID is still with us. There is a very vicious backlash to this. And so what do you think about the backlash? Who's leading the backlash? And what are the effects of it? And what would you say how we deal with this moving forward?
So I think the backlash has to do, again, politics. People who don't trust the government. I think some of it is political. I think after Biden came into office, I think some of the other folks was trying to show him up, and so they started protesting and making noise. Then you have the people who are afraid join that bandwagon. But I am very sympathetic to restaurant owners. Chasing, I love Suede. My daughters go to your other restaurant, but I go to Suede, and I feel it for restaurant owners because they were closed for so many months,
Yeah.
lost so much income, and then they were the first one that had to sort of enforce this mandate. I think, Berta, council member, soon be bar president, government have to value people. I don't think government really value the opinion of people. Even when a commission or committee, as I said, I was on the state vaccination committee, and we said stuff, nothing changed. So government have to see people as true partners, and not just invite us because you need to fill a room, right? And because if you value the opinion of community leaders, then you consider that. How do you make a law or a ruling without getting consent from people or recommendation from people. And if the government doesn't value people, this will continue to happen. And until government realize, listen, we have to consult our constituent. We need to get their opinion, get their advice. They're on the ground. They're dealing with people every day. What are the people saying? And if that doesn't happen, we're going to continue to have backlash on this and on many, many other issues. And while we have a backlash, I mean, New York City, for the most part, really, really good. I have siblings that live in Florida, and I went to Florida last year. No one was wearing a mask in Florida last year. No, I feel strange wearing mine. So, so I think we have done well in New York City and in New York State. We just have to stay the course. The good thing is that we have a new government coming in the city, and hopefully the new government, from the mayor right down to almost an entire new city council, there will be a different approach. Because I think while I'm for the mandate, the approach was wrong. Union said it. We weren't consulted. We weren't given enough time
Yes.
to inform our members. So there has to be collaboration. Bertha, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Well, listen, I have to say, I'm giving thanks for this panel. I mean, you know, Pastor Nicholas assured us that the rapture has not come. I feel so much more relieved with that. We know where we're going to get good food. We know that, you know, Elaine, you know, she got that J&J and she got them herbs for you. So if you need it, you got it. Dia, you know, Maimonides, you know, one of the best centers. And again, you know, as you say, when you mandate something, mandate is a different thing from, you know, do this for yourself, because some people don't do things to protect themselves. And, you know, at least more other folks. And Mark, remember what has been said here today. Do not put a panel together. Do not have, you know, some advisory committee if you already have made up your mind,
That's
because
right.
you're the government. This is the worst thing that you could do. But thank you all for this, all races, all faces. I just want to remind folks that are watching and that will be watching this, All Races, All Faces, published by the Black Institute, is a book. You know, if you want to donate to keep our work going, this book, All Races, All Faces, covers every immigrant community here in New York City, because we are a majority minority city, and this is a city full of immigrants, as we all are, one generation or another. So thank you all. Stay safe, stay healthy, and always follow the Black Institute.
Yeah. Thank you for having me, Berta. It was nice.
Thank you.
Thank
God
you.
bless everyone.
God bless.